Good evening, everyone, and a warm welcome to this special UNICEF virtual live discussion on menstrual hygiene in the Eastern Caribbean. I'm Kareem Smith, the Communications Associate with the UNICEF Eastern Caribbean Area Office, and I'm really pleased that you've joined us this evening, wherever you're tuning in from. Now, I imagine the first question that might have popped into your mind when you saw this event was, why menstrual hygiene? And well, here's the thing, more than 500 women and girls across the world still don't have access to the basic resources or support they need to manage their periods safely, comfortably, and with dignity. Menstruation related challenges affect the education, health, and economic opportunities of women and girls everywhere, including right here in the Eastern Caribbean. They limit full and equal participation in society. That is why Menstrual Hygiene Day, which is celebrated or observed rather next Wednesday, the 28th of May, is so important. This observance calls attention to the inequalities and taboos surrounding menstruation. And this year's theme, Together for a Period Friendly World, is a call to action for all of us to ensure that periods don't get in the way of anyone's education, health, or future. And I also think that you may be wondering something else. And I think so because it's a question that I've been asked more than once since we advertised this live discussion. And it's, why is a man moderating a discussion about periods? Fair question. And the truth is, in my view, and in, I believe in the view of UNICEF and all of my colleagues, is that we can't truly create a period friendly world without the support of everyone. And that includes men and boys as well. At UNICEF, we believe that men and boys have an essential role to play in terms of supporting, but we can only do that if we're willing to show up, to listen, and to be a part of conversations that admittedly sometimes may make us feel a bit uncomfortable. And that's exactly what I'm here to do this evening, to listen and to learn. So now I am pleased to introduce six incredible young women from across the Eastern Caribbean who will be sharing their experiences and perspectives on this topic, menstrual health and hygiene. Please join me in welcoming Adia Daniel, who's from St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Ajane Hodge from St. Kitts and Nevis, Mariah Wong Chang from Trinidad and Tobago, Alyssa Mitchum, who is from Barbados, Sumira Charles, who is from St. Lucia, and Uniquo Romney from Anguilla. Thank you all for joining us this evening. And these young women are leaders in their own right. And tonight, they are the ones, not me, who will be guiding us through this discussion and specifically five key areas that have been identified as being the cornerstones of a truly period friendly world. And those five areas are social environment. So we're going to discuss social environments. We're going to discuss education around periods, access to um, products, facilities and public spaces, and menstrual health services. And the hope and the expectation is that we would be able to come up with some concrete actions as well, um, so that for us as UNICEF, we can continue to work with partners, governments, and other agencies to ensure that we are able to collectively as a society move towards more period friendly societies. All right. So I think without further ado, we can get straight into it. And um, Adia, let's start with you. We're going to be discussing period friendly social environments, and we want to start with the spaces closest to home, with a discussion on stigma. So the first thing, is quite a personal note to start on, but have you ever had reason to feel ashamed or judged about your period by someone close to you? And if so, what kind of impact did that have on you? All right. Alia, we're not hearing you. I'm not sure why. Um, okay, what about you, Ajane?
Okay, are you hearing me?
Loud and clear.
Okay. Well, when I've never been judged or ashamed about my period, however, during conversations, I have met a few girls who have been. This happened mostly with the young men around them because they were unaware. Yeah, that's what happened.
And what would you say was the impact that had
Mm.
on them?
Well, I think they spread rumors because a few of them did say they hid about their period in the initial stages, and they didn't really share that they were having their period until like later on. So I think that affected them emotionally in terms of their confidence about their period. And when they got it, I think they were so scared about how people would judge them that they hid it.
I see. Thank you. And that's is do we still have Adia?
Hi everyone. Sorry
Loud
about
and clear.
that. Yeah, I'm hearing you guys now perfectly. Really happy to be here today and be a part of these insightful discussions. Um, as someone with who struggles with endometriosis and polycystic ovaries, it's really a pleasure to be here today to share with you guys the experience of not just myself, but of many girls across the Caribbean. And I got my menstruation very, very early. I'm talking in grade 4 when I was 9 or 10. And so I remember it being a very scary experience because my friends now look at me as someone who's indirectly older than them because I was the only one in my friend group who had gotten her menstruation that early. And it was a challenge being that young, having to manage that part of life, as well as managing just the social effects because then everybody looks at you differently because you're young. And so I just remember feeling very, judged, very like I was looked upon. And to manage that really and truly, I think family support and friend support really helps. Interestingly, at that age, I had very good teachers who would step in here and there because it came randomly on a Thursday afternoon in school after lunch. And so I can really recall that being a very sort of touchy period for me when I got my menstruation. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And you of course made mention about the support systems that you had around. Um, are there any other things, especially around these schools and in homes, to make sure that menstruation is something that is considered to be normal as it is, and that there is less shame and stigma associated with it? What needs to change?
I think it's just the balance between being realistic and also being full of empathy. It is not easy having to be in a friend group or being at school or even in your own home where you're supposed to feel most comfortable and you just don't have the support structure. So I think where home, as I like to say sometimes, when home is not home for certain people, I think we have to normalize having open conversations about menstruation and periods in school. If I'm in school for almost 8 hours of the day, then there should be some sort of provision at school to make me feel comfortable to say, hey, my period came yesterday and I'm feeling these different emotions and I'm not too sure how do I manage them. I don't want to lash out on my friends. I don't want it to take a toll on my schoolwork. How do I deal with it? And I think the integration of menstrual hygiene and menstrual advocacy within the health and family life education classes that we mandate here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, I think rippling that effect across the Caribbean is definitely needed for just making school sort of a safe space where you don't have that support at home. So you now differentiate between support structures in school where I am for most of the hours of my day, and then when I go home where that support lacks. So it's sort of just trying to create a balance between that home environment and that school environment.
Thank you so much, Adia, for that very insightful perspective, and also for being so honest and candid about your own personal experience, which I'm sure could not have been easy. At this time, I'm gonna ask Mariah to jump in. What are your take on, or what's your take on the info that we shared so far?
Hi everyone, I'm Mariah Wongchong, here hailing from Trinidad and Tobago. Well, I just wanted to share my look on it as I believe that I have a different view on this stigma around periods and our menstrual cycles. I was grown up in a way or taught to love every part of myself, even the ugly parts. So when it came to my period, it might be because mine came a little later than others, and I started secondary school pretty early, where all the rest of the girls were having their periods, and I was like, I'm missing out, but I wasn't really missing out. But the main point that I'm trying to get across here is that for me, periods wasn't something to shy away from it. I was almost too open about my periods to my teachers, to my friends, and I wouldn't use it as an excuse, but I wouldn't say to let it hold me back. Because if I was in school and someone asked me, Mariah, you okay? What's going on? I'd just say, I'm on my period. I'm not feeling too well. I wouldn't shy away from the honest truth, which is why my period had a big effect on me and my school life. And I wasn't going to let that stop me from having a wonderful school life.
Very well said. Very well said, Maria. And again, thank you for being so honest and so candid. And what I'm hearing is that clearly for every adolescent girl, this experience is different. But what is clear is that there's a certain level of education on the topic that needs to be in place, a certain level of empathy from those around, and as Adia indicated, one of the ways that that can be done is by ensuring that it is included in school curriculum as well. So I'm going to take us back to Ajane, um, just to kind of weigh in on Adia's suggestion. What needs to change in schools? And is there a role for our governments in terms of mandating that there be a greater level of education around menstrual health in our schools?
Okay, thank you again, Mr. Smith. Period is a very taboo word, particularly when I started this conversation and I shared it with the guys in my class, with my classmates. I was going to talk about menstrual health. Their first question was menstrual cycles. So you're going to just go on Instagram and start talking about menstrual cycles. And I was like, yeah. And the children in primary school, they're in the lower grades, such as first and second form, they're more open about it because the Department of Education has been trying to integrate in their new improved and enhanced curriculum menstrual education and period education. However, our boys are still unaware, even our girls, because some of them are still kind of shy about their period, about the actual topic. They know it comes every month and they know the symptoms that lead up to it, but they don't really appreciate it. They're embarrassed by it. So I believe if we can encourage our girls, such as Miss Wan Chang from Trinidad mentioned, she was confident about hers. If we can make girls confident or like make it a regular topic so that they don't shy away when it does come up, that it would really impact our schools and generations. Also, when I was growing up, when I got mine, my mother, I wasn't afraid because my mom had spoken to me about it before. And when I initially started to go back to school, we went shopping for a new school supply. This one was called a care kit that would have in all my necessities, such as your pads, your wipes, or an extra pair of extra underwear. So if we can also encourage girls to have those things, I think they would feel more comfortable when they see that time of the month coming around, and they won't have to worry whether or not it's in school. Also, in February of this year, so there's been improvement in my country. February of this year, the Department of Health and Gender Affairs integrated a new initiative alongside UNICEF, Lake Health, and a few other sponsors, which was called Menstrual Education Project, where it was integrated in high schools, first and second form, particularly, that you can go to your counselor and get a period package. This package contained wipes, a pad, and an extra pair of underwear just in case you had a mess or you got it for the first time and you were unaware. Our counselors also have been open about this topic. We got the talk in first form, a true real talk in first form, and it was a kind of embarrassing topic at first. It was a lot of giggles and turning of your heads, but as we aged more, or as I have observed in the younger generations, it doesn't seem to be a giggly topic. They actually understand and are more open about it. So there have been strides to improve the vision on period, but there's still a few other enhancements that could happen.
Thank you very much, Ajane. And I think there were quite a number of things that stood out in my mind. The first is definitely the fact that you had that conversation at home first from an early age. And then I'm also thinking about the fact that this was discussed in school and that there were actually measures put in place, packages, so to speak, to support girls who had gotten their first period. And based on those comments that you've made, I want to bring in Sumira. And my question for you, Sumira, is do you remember when and how you first learned about periods? And beyond that, do you think that um, menstrual hygiene and health is something that is being discussed at an early enough age in our societies?
Hi, I'm hoping you can hear me.
Loud and clear.
Okay,
We're
great.
hearing you. We're hearing you.
Yes. So I was actually introduced to it in about grade three. But the thing is, it wasn't necessarily a deep conversation about menstrual health. What was covered was more topics like what to expect when you're going through puberty. So we were made aware that there's things that boys go through and there are things that girls go through. For example, we undergo our menstrual cycle, we go through menstruation. And boys, for example, go have a deeper voice or develop an Adam's apple. So we kind of just touched the surface there. But I actually really learned about my period when it happened to me, when I first saw Spotty, and I was confused. I was like, what's going on here? Like, am I dying? Is something happening to me? Am I sick or something? And I immediately rushed to my mother, and she made me aware that this is your period. It's coming. And what do I need to do next? So she showed me how to use a pad. She also made me aware of maybe some other symptoms that can happen. And it was something as well that I learned on my own as I got older. So I started to learn my body more and know some of the things that I could experience. And with speaking to more of my friends, I learned more about I'd say, symptoms associated with having a period. But it is definitely something I think should be introduced to individuals, even in grade 3, like I was, um, because one, periods normally start from the ages of 10 to 14. However, we need to also take into account that some people experience their periods before 10, so at 9. Sometimes, in some rare cases, I'm sure, as early as 8, or even as late as 15, or even later than that. So we need to start educating our younger girls, even at the age of 8 or 9, on what a period is, how to use a pad, right? Tell them about some other alternatives, tell them about the menstrual cup, even talk about tampons. And already the topic of tampons is such kind of like a taboo, because I remember having to search up with my friends, what can a tampon do to you? Does it affect your virginity? And for tampons, sorry, to be seen as such something so wrong to use, it was something I had to learn that it was okay. And girls at 9 should know about these things too. That eventually they would have to use tampons or menstrual pads when the period does come, and what to expect as well.
Yeah. Very, very well said, Sumira. And again, um, you know, I'm learning of one or two things that I did not necessarily know before. So thank you. So thank you for sharing that. And I want to bring Uniqua now into the conversation. Who, in your opinion, um, need the most education based on your experience and the experience of your peers? Who needs the most education when it comes to menstrual health? And what do you think people need to know?
Okay, can you hear me properly?
Yeah, loud and clear.
I truly believe that we shouldn't limit it to one gender specifically. I feel all genders should be equally educated on this topic because it's often desensitized. For me personally, I grew up around mostly boys, and although it was something normal for a woman, I thought it was so nasty having a period because although I grew up with mostly women in my life, I didn't want anything to do with a period. So I feel we shouldn't limit it to just one gender. I feel all persons should be deeply educated on such a natural thing that must happen to all women.
Thank you so much, Uniqua. And I'm gonna have to agree with you there that I think both genders should be equally educated um, about periods and about menstruation. Maria, you had a comment that you wanted to make?
Yes, it's also about the education about around menstrual cycles. Basically, as was said before, we as women experience our periods as early and as rarely as 8 years old, up until 15 plus. Education shouldn't start after we have our periods. We should get them before we have our periods. And they should be in our primary schools, not in secondary school, when most girls already have their periods and already start taking care of themselves. I believe that we should not be afraid to educate ourselves about our body. This is happening to us, and we shouldn't be scared about what is happening to us. As in the case of some people think they're going to die, and they're not going to die. This is a natural process that happens to every female body on the planet. The other point that I wanted to share was that we shouldn't shy away from teaching men as well, because as I believe, there are things called girl dads and single fathers. These men have daughters that they will need to teach about periods, and it's kind of embarrassing as they as men have to go and figure out about periods now and pads and all this information to teach their daughters. And if this information was taught to everyone at a young age, that it happens to everyone, well, women, that it wouldn't be something taboo. It wouldn't be something that we would be hush hush about because this is a natural process.
Sorry, yes, I was muted. No, but I was just commending you on your very insightful comments and for pointing out, as we all know, that there are girl dads and single fathers who need to be fully aware and um, of what needs to be done. So what I wanted to ask you another question as well, though, especially given how much you've clearly thought about this particular topic. If you were given the opportunity to redesign how periods are taught in schools, in communities, what would that look like? How would you ensure that education, so to speak, is as effective as possible?
Well, not to reinvent the wheel, but as we know, many students in primary school and early secondary school have the talk about puberty. And in puberty, they barely scratch the surface about what happens, the changes that happens to teenage girls and teenage boys. This needs to be a more in-depth and um, a more lengthened course in the case of that it shouldn't be just one day where you gather all the form ones and form twos, stuff them in a room with a nurse, and have a PowerPoint session, and that's all they know. And by the time they leave that room, all that information just whoosh out of their head. This should be something that is done regularly and consistently. Around the time of when they're now leaving primary school and entering secondary school, these young children should know how to take care of their body and what is happening to them and to feel comfortable with this change and not to be scared of their period, of the blood, of the pain, but to know that what is happening is natural and I have the information to handle it.
Excellent. And now, I'm gonna introduce someone who we haven't heard from just yet, Relissa. And to move on a bit to access to period products, because once we've been able to be educated and to understand, and I think the next step is, how do we ensure that we provide the types of products that girls will need. So my question to you: have you ever personally or know some person who has had to miss school because they didn't have access to sanitary products?
No, not having access. Maybe the fact that you wake up one day and you say, "Well, my period came before it was supposed to come," and then you're in shock. So now you have to go and look for something that you can't go to school. In that aspect, yes, but in not having the actual products, I don't think I've ever heard anybody say that to me personally or myself.
Okay. What, Mariah? What about you?
I'm so sorry, I'm just busy writing notes because I'm loving this. If you could just repeat the last question.
Yeah, no, I was just asking about an experience where someone that you know or you personally had to miss school because you didn't have an access to sanitary products. So we're talking about access as we move on from education and trying to get a sense of whether throughout the Eastern Caribbean um, girls generally have access to the products that they need and also the products that they want, you know.
Well, I will say my personal experience. Well, where I was found in such a dire situation where my period came early and I was not sufficiently prepared for it, as in I did not have any sanitary products on hand. When I went to we have a guidance counselor. We didn't have a school nurse per se because this is a upper six. I went to the counselor and I asked her if she had any sanitary pads, but she did not, which is kind of appalling since most of the population of the school is girls. And even when I asked fellow girls if they had any extra that they could give me, most of the time, women, if they're not having their period on during that week or preparing for it in the next week, they don't actually carry sanitary products all the time. unless they have like a bag that they carry in their school bag all the time. So I was forced to call my parents and to come pick me up and to get some Panadol and to take me home for the day since, this is blood we're dealing with. But when thinking back on that situation, sometimes some girls are not as lucky as I am to be able to call their parents and their parent to be able to come quickly and to deal with the incident swiftly, right? Sometimes they would have to make makeshift pads with toilet paper and stuff, and those things don't really work. And there's a host of the sanitary issues with those things as well, especially with the bathroom. Female bathrooms really need an upgrade and an improvement, especially in schools. I lost my thought process there, but
Yeah.
I think that's it.
No, very sound, very solid. I'm going to ask Sumira to weigh in on this particular issue, not necessarily about um, an experience, unless there is one to share. But I also wanted to know beyond that, what measures can be put in place in school by school administrators, but also by governments to ensure that girls have access to the products that they need. And for me, I'm thinking about Barbados, for instance, where taxes were removed from sanitary products. But what else can be done at the school level, but also at the government and at the policy level to ensure that every girl has access to the types of products that they need and want?
Okay, so I'm actually going to state two implementations that was brought about by the government of St. Lucia in 2023. It was actually what was implemented is a price control on feminine hygiene products. So it's to last for 2 years, and it started from October 23rd, 2023, and it's due to end in August 1st, 2025. So hoping that it actually continues and it doesn't just stop from here, from August 1st, 2025. There was also actually a budget address recently for 2025 to 2026, where the Prime Minister stated that they will be allocating $250,000 to the Ministry of Education to provide sanitary products, feminine hygiene care products to schools and to students who need these products as well too, or who can't afford. And it's a way of them combating period poverty. So these are definitely two things that I think within the region needs to be established in some way, that some sort of funds are allocated towards providing feminine hygiene care products for for all women across the board, because for small developing islands that most of us are, affording period products are very expensive. And the thing is, even if the price control, period products are still expensive. For crying out loud, why is some of the good products $20, and why is like the cheap pads that by the time you check, like, you're using 20 pads of one of those packets a day, because it doesn't soak up much, because most of us experience heavy periods, or some of us experience light periods, etc. But it's still very expensive for many. So I'm actually hoping that one day period products become free. I'm aware that certain changes would have to be made in order for that to happen, but it is something that is necessary, and I'm glad that we're moving in that direction. So I'm hoping that in the future that I'll be able to go somewhere to a health center, for crying out loud, and be able to access a menstrual pad or a menstrual cup or whatever it is. Oh, and I want to add as well, sorry. I also
Go
want to
ahead.
add as well. I think it's important for the government to also implement something like some sort of standard for schools and even workplaces, because sometimes we tend to neglect workplaces when it comes to the menstrual hygiene talk. Because I think sometimes employers think that because you're adults that you can afford to buy your own menstrual products, but it's actually something that should be given as well as a free product in bathrooms or whatever it is. So standards can be introduced by governments to ensure that schools, workplaces, etc., all have the necessary equipment like bins, maybe private stalls, um, running water, water storages, all put in place so that each and every environment is a safe space for women alike.
Very solid, very solid points, and I hear you loud and clear. Um, and again, one of the points you made was about access, not to just products, any products, but the types of products that girls and women want to use, because they that products that the types of products that meet their own specific needs. And that's why I keep stressing on not just products that you need, because um you could provide pads, for instance, but what are the types of products that girls want based on their specific situations? Adia, I've seen you nodding your head throughout this discussion. What are your thoughts?
I do agree with um having the cost of period products subsidized. And on another note, I think it's important to highlight that I'm not sure in the other Caribbean countries, but here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, we have a program for um, young men, as well as where contraceptives come in as well. So I think if we just mirror that, because for example, when I was in secondary school, which is in the capital, Kingston, there's a post office. At the post office and other public health institutions, apart from the post office, you can actually go and get condoms. You can go and get contraceptive pills. And I think if we have the same mindset of where we not just bordering education, but also just having the access to the period products, I think mirroring that program to menstrual cycles would be very helpful. Also, I think in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, a big issue for us, and I think this goes into our next topic as well, making public spaces and public bathrooms period friendly. We have a problem here where we don't have many companies that provide the specific sanitary, for lack of a better word, probably sanitary products per se. So the special bins. There's actually special toilet paper, well, a preferred toilet paper medically, and so on. We have one company here, and because that company is in demand, the cost to have access to these type of bins in public spaces, in schools, in the workplace, it's expensive. And so on the national level and the policy level, I think it's important that some sort of partnership is made. And I think I was making somebody else, I think it was Mariah, was making the point that this is supposed to be a collective effort. It's not just women looking out for women, but also companies looking out for the well-being of our young girls. And I think that's one thing on two things, sorry, on the government and policy level that we could kind of integrate, apart from, of course, the education in health and family life education, putting it as just a small part of the curriculum. And somebody else also pointed out that when they were introduced to the idea of period, it wasn't more so specific to period, but to puberty, right? And I think that was a very important point as well, where access is concerned.
Okay, so also a role I'm hearing for the private sector, for our businesses, and not just government, but a whole of society approach, which makes sense.
Definitely.
Um, Uniqua, Relissa, um, let's move the
Hello.
discussion to public spaces and facilities. What are your thoughts on what currently exists and where we need to be as a society when it comes to access to public facilities and places for women to use bathroom spaces, etc.
Me personally, in certain areas on my island, we are not adequately provided for. in terms of with periods and stuff. Sometimes even some public spaces doesn't even have toilet paper. And I think that is a serious issue because as a woman, sometimes you can just abruptly get your period and not even having toilet paper. That can be a serious issue. And I must say, yes, certain places do have it, they do offer pads, but I feel we really need to work on that issue and widely have these products at the spot.
Solid. And Relissa, your
I
thoughts. What's the situation like in Barbados?
Similar to Uniqua, there's some places that you would go and you would say, well, okay, now in a takeout on the spot, and you probably have gone on your menstrual cycle, and you tell yourself, okay, let me go to the bathroom quickly. You go to the bathroom now, you go and do what you have to do, and then you realize, oh, there's no tissue. What am I supposed to do? And then say, for me, I typically walk with something in my bag just in case, but say you don't have something in your bag, then you don't know what to do. Some places do offer these things with tissue, which is just tissue, but they do offer the tissue too, but that's in some places. And offering sanitary napkins and stuff like that in the bathroom is something that I've talked with one of my friends at BCC. That's something that she was talking about, even in schools and stuff like that, offering it to the students because students are are typically the ones who will get it randomly. So to have it there accessible for them to get it in that space of time is more accessible to them, even in public bathrooms as well, because yeah, we still the schools is where most of the people that will get their periods, young girls will be, but that's where you should most likely provide it to. But at the same time, when you out and about and you are not really thinking about what I'm supposed to do, if I'm supposed to bring this and that, and you may be busy, it may be best that you have those things in the bathrooms. And if we could not afford, if we could allocate those certain things to public bathrooms here in Barbados, that would be perfect for some young ladies.
All right. So Adia, I see you. I just want to pose this question to Ajane, who is the youngest person on the life. I know most of you have already moved on to college and to do your associate degrees and sixth forms. But I wanted to find out from Ajane because I know she's still in school. What's it like at your school in St. Kitts and Nevis?
Okay, as I was listening to most of the girls, I do agree with their comments. And I feel as though that in St. Kitts and Nevis, and I would assume it's the wider Caribbean as I've been listening, that we don't have access. So I am thinking that if we partner with the government and create a quote unquote period bank, where if you get your period unexpectedly, you could grab and go, you can get your sanitary napkin, you can get a wipes, or even, I don't know, an underwear and change and clean yourself so that you feel comfortable to go back out. This would reinforce confidence, knowing that you can walk into any public space and have your necessities. Additionally, when it comes to the education, as most of them have been saying, it's a lot of talk. What if we brought in demonstrations and don't segregate the boys, because we're trying to shape young men who will be husbands and in some very unfortunate cases, single dads. They shouldn't be embarrassed about talking to their daughters about this or helping their wives. So if we can have pad demonstrations or tampons so we don't think that we lose our virginity, that would be quite amazing rather than just sitting down and listening to a long, long, long PowerPoint, as Mariah would have said, and not remembering a thing when you walk out. So, period banks in public spaces and demonstrations in our lectures and in our demonstrations. Also, we can do, I don't know, a confidence workshop with parents because they often wait too late to teach their girls. I was taught at an early age, but some girls weren't taught about it until they were in the bathroom and their underwear was messed up. Now, if we can make girls aware about this before, they wouldn't be frightened about the period itself. They'll be like, oh, this is what mommy was telling me about, or this is what teacher was telling me about. So that's so starting at a young age, such as grade 3 or 4, and reinforcing it throughout primary school and high school would help students become more prepared. Also, in the bathrooms, as I said, in the public spaces, the bins aren't so period friendly. You'd walk in, you'd go change your pad, and you go out to throw away your pad and you realize there's no lid. That's not respectful or period friendly at all. So if we can get better bins, public banks, and make education more of a universal thing rather than just children or child, and bring in our parents, both mothers and fathers, and our boys into this education and showing what to expect, how to be prepared, or how to train yourself for these little life things would really help in some way.
Great points, Ajane. And I'm now going to add Adia. And Adia, I'm also mindful, if my memory serves me correct, that you are a student of law as well. And so when you listen to all of the points, I know that you have another specific point in mind, but just something to think about for after you've made your point. Are these issues in terms of access to facilities, are these things that you think can be encapsulated in policies and guidelines from our policymakers?
Right. So just a short comment on the period friendly spaces in public bathrooms and so on. I'm not sure how many of you have actually thought about this, but I get so cringe when I go to the bathroom and we're already familiar with the term bare minimum, right? And I get the bare minimum. Toilet paper, maybe soap if I'm lucky. But have we actually thought about having bathrooms specific to women on their periods, the spacing, having probably like hooks and shelves so that we can put our bags so we can comfortably organize ourselves, because I know that space for me is an issue. I hate public bathrooms. I don't expect to get a 5-star hotel experience, but at the same time, just like in airports where you have specific spaces for mothers to change diapers and so on, I just think it's important as well to have a specific space for, hey, women on their period right now. Just a bigger space. The bathroom itself has to be bigger. And as well as just places to rest our bags, our care kits, and so on. On the matter of policy, though, I think it's going to be contradictory that I say this, but it is quite tricky to integrate period policies into national policy. However, what I think we can do, instead of making it more on a national level, what I think we can do is come up with a specific set of policies for primary schools, a specific set of policies for secondary schools, college, workplaces, etc. And when we bring in the matter of the public spaces, obviously, I think that there should be mandations of certain things. Again, on the policy side of things, where we have cost reduction and so on, I think this is really something that governments can do on a national and policy level. As well as, I remember, Kareem, you were making the point that Barbados made significant strides in that there are no tariffs now, there's no taxes on period products. And
Yeah.
I don't I've never heard of that for the rest of the Caribbean. This is the first time I'm hearing that. So little things like that, is how we make strides toward just a safer space where maybe one day a pad might be $2, or even pads, the basic women need for a menstrual cycle, can be free. I think on the policy level, there are definitely things that we can integrate into more so the education system, maybe not on a national level, but specific to the education system. Because on a more national level, especially partnering with private sector, it may be a bit tricky to actually come up with a framework specific to that. So it's just about inclusion.
Excellent. And I think it's very funny, Adia, that you before posing your suggestion about period friendly bathrooms, you asked, and obviously it was a rhetorical question, have you ever thought of this? And I'll tell you the truth, I had never thought of it. And I think that's one example of why these discussions are so important. And also I think why men need to be included and to be willing to listen as well. So thank you for that. At this time, I want to bring in Uniqua. Your thoughts on everything that has been shared.
I really like how the conversation is going and how we are bringing these issues to the front and how periods aren't adequately talked about and how desensitized it is from many young women and men. So I love that how we are talking about it and bringing our ideas to the table and really making this seen and heard.
Thank you. And Relissa, what about you?
Yeah, I love the conversation that's going so far on everything that has been said. There were some points that made that was true. There's a point that I want to add is I think it was Adair that said she had endometriosis, and similar to her, I do have endometriosis. And something that I thought about that would be very beneficial to some people, like who have very bad period cramps and then at sometimes need rest and stuff like that, is making a space that does not like the nurse, because the only place for me at BCC, the only place that I can go and rest is in the nurse. Make a space if you can that we could have rest, that we could at least, recuperate ourselves, have some time to, sit down and tell ourselves, well, my body is changing right in this moment and it's not adapting to my environment, or I'm too tired, or whatever's happening in the moment. That I can have a time to sit to myself, not in a classroom, not in a lounge, not in a canteen, not in a class, nothing so, but in a space that I feel comfortable, not in the bathroom even, because some of the bathrooms are very uncomfortable to even just stand in sometimes, if especially when it's cold and raining. So a space that you can feel comfortable enough to just sit down if it's not home, as some people most of the time you're not home. So if you could find a space that you could then feel comfortable to sit down and tell yourself, well, my body right now feels very weird and I feel uncomfortable, that if that could be adapted, that would be something nice alongside the legislation.
Excellent. So Uniqua has said that she has another point to make, and I think something that we didn't really touch on that Relissa has no kind of brought to the fore is the actual experience of being on your period, and the changes that are taking place, and sometimes there's pain, and persons are not girls are not necessarily able um to do some of the things that they normally would during other portions or other times of their cycle. So Unique, do you want to weigh in on that a bit? What are some of the things about um when you are having your period that perhaps persons don't necessarily think of, don't necessarily understand, that you would want them to know?
Wait, firstly, could I go back to the point she made about having comfortable spaces for young women?
Yeah,
I
sure.
must say, in my school personally, we established like a lounge room. It had beds and stuff. And when I was in we have different levels to high school. So when I was on the first level, they even offered skirts to young girls. So they would offer pads and skirts, and I feel like something like that should be introduced everywhere. Having a space where you could just lay down and feel comfortable. If you have a little issue at school, being able to change. And back to the other point you made, could you repeat the question, please?
Yes. So I was asking about the actual experience, and some of the things that girls go through, some of the challenges that they may have that, perhaps a male like me, or boys at school might not necessarily understand. What are some of the things that you would want persons to understand about the experience?
It can be very painful. Many men, they be like, you're so dramatic, da da da. No, how are you gonna tell me how to feel? And for me personally, like I said, although I grew up with only women in my life, I mostly grew up with younger boys, with my male cousins. So it's very embarrassing for me. And I would sort of hide when I was on my period because to me it was just like so nasty. And I just used to reject the thought of a period. So I would avoid it and I'll be very self conscious of leaks and all these different stuff. So I'll be out, and instead of literally enjoying myself, I'll be thinking, oh my gosh, am I having a leak? Like I would not be able to enjoy myself. In the period cramps again, it is so painful. And some people like to make it seem like it's so dramatic and oh, you just making excuses. But the things women have to go through, and we really aren't applauded enough for how strong our bodies are for going through all of this is just crazy.
Noted. Noted. And again, these are things that need to be said, especially for persons who do not go through it. I think it's kind of
Yes,
crazy to suggest that as a man, I have no idea what a period is or how it feels, but I can just conclude that you are being
very painful.
dramatic. It's crazy. Crazy. Mariah wanted to add a comment as well.
Now, ladies, let's not downplay our periods. It's not just pain. There are many things that our periods affect, and it's not just the process of bleeding and having our period. There are physical, psychological, emotional effects that it has on a woman's day-to-day life. Our periods is so in tune with our hormonal balances. It affects our mood of the day, how we experience certain situations. It all changes on our period. Many ladies have mood swings, anxiety, so much fatigue just from going through with that process. Many things affect our period cycle that we don't even realize sometimes. It includes our age, our weight, our hormonal fluctuations, stress, lifestyle habits, which includes exercising, what you eat, what you do regularly, underlying medical conditions. There are many underlying medical conditions connected to our periods that sometimes we don't even talk about. Our period is not just a period. Our period affects our brain, it affects our body, it affects our emotions. It's not just pain, it's how we react to other people as well. Our period is so diverse for each and every woman. It's a kind of unique experience to each other. That's why women, when we come together, we shouldn't be so hard on each other with our period because everyone experiences our periods differently. I had a time when I was going through a pretty rough period and I could not focus for the love of it in class. I was totally zoned out. I could not focus on anything else but the pain. I would be snappy, irritable. Your period changes you. It's not just pain. And I think we need to delve deeper into the mental aspects of our period. There is mental illnesses tied to periods as well. Before, in preparation for this event, I sent out a questionnaire to my friends and to female relatives and to other female colleagues that I had. And there's this one story that I would like to share about this young lady, about the pain and mental health issues that came connected to her period. She said she felt bad. Hold on, let me just rephrase that properly. The pain and mental health issues that come with my period wouldn't be as bad if I didn't feel guilty every time I bought a pad that cost so much money when I needed that money for food even more. That's heartbreaking. Why should we feel guilty for something that's natural? That's something that happens to every woman. We shouldn't be feeling guilty about that, but that's how society made it, about how our pads are so expensive for something that's natural and that happens every month. Come on, people. Period is not just the process, it affects us so much more than that.
Excellent. And based on what you've shared, I want to take us to what we had identified as the final topic, and I want to allow Sumira to respond to this. And my producer for Hannah was just explaining to me again something that I may not necessarily just naturally know, but she was making the point that well, it is expected that there would be some level of discomfort during periods in circumstances where that pain is debilitating or it prevents you from, you know, performing, you know, fairly regular tasks, that um, access to menstrual health in terms of clinics or the doctor is something that needs to come into play. And so, Sumira, if you can just weigh in on what exists, do girls feel comfortable taking these issues to healthcare professionals? And to what extent, as Mariah would have pointed out, to what extent do we also need to think about mental health around within this entire discussion?
Okay, I actually had a few points to make because there were so many different insights I was getting, and like it just made me so excited having this
Yeah.
conversation. But I too did some sort of a questionnaire for my friends and my community, and I got a response that ties to mental health. So someone said in response to a question on have you ever felt uncomfortable being at school during your period? Um, they stated that yes, the emotional cycle that accompanies periods sometimes feels like it's written across your forehead. Sometimes people behave like periods are abnormal, like it isn't a part of life. And then also, yes, because I feel uncomfortable wearing a pad, the environment is always so hot and sticky, and sometimes I get overstimulated being around many people whilst on my period, not knowing if I leak through my pad or if they can smell that I am on my period. So I know that during that time when we do go through our period, or sometimes before when we are experiencing, I'd say I don't like using the word symptoms, but the symptoms of a period, you can have that time when you feel somewhat anxious. You're afraid to go out in public. You feel uncomfortable when you're walking, and you have to be asking your friend, can you check my pants for me, because you're afraid that maybe some blood seeped out while you were sitting down or something of the sort. And with that as well, we also have to discuss premenstrual syndrome, which affects a lot of women. And this can tie into mental health in the case that women can go through depression as a result of their menstrual cycle. And, with hormone imbalances, a lot can happen. I too have been um, introduced to some changes in my period because of stress, especially during the time of COVID-19. It was a very stressful period, I know, for many, many people. And I actually did not have my period for 6 months during that time.
Oh,
um, because then again, I was worried. I was sometimes overeating, so weight gain also added to that. Um, I was staying up late all the time. I kind of had somewhat of insomnia. Sometimes I would not even eat at times. So it was a very stressful period for me. And in that case, it did affect my period. And I had to seek help from a doctor. I'm very thankful that there actually are doctors on island who are involved in talks like this, um, and are open to seeing patients of my age, or even open to coming to schools and giving these talks to students, letting them know that it's okay, and also letting them know of other reproductive disorders that can happen to them. I won't say disorders, sorry. Other reproductive issues that can happen to them. For example, endometriosis, PCOS, fibroids, and with having some of these disorders, it itself can bring some sort of depression in some way too. Because I know some people, they experience PCOS, and unfortunately, they are infertile and are unable to have any children. So when they are trying with their family, it's very difficult, and that can cause such a mental turmoil, especially to someone who's trying to start a family. When you hear the many different stories that are attached to our periods, our menstrual cycle, it's kind of heartbreaking because women go through so much, you know, and every day, I mean, what we have to do is support each other, and I think a community is very necessary, um, especially with friends, family, even just regular people in your community. It's not just an individual issue; it's something that happens within the community to every single household. So I'm very thankful that I do have a community, a group of friends that can support me or support others like myself when going through anything. Because luckily, too, I went to an all girls school. So talking about our menstrual cycle was actually very informative, and we were very open to the topic. We could just blurt out any day, like, you know what, my period, like my period, making my belly hurts, I get cramps, like, girl, my head, I have a headache, I have a diarrhea, you know. So yeah.
Thank you. And again, thank you to Mariah as well, both of you who actually were able to not just share your own personal experiences or even experiences shared by word of mouth, but who actually were able to go and to kind of collect data um, from others. Again, also very solid points on the importance of a whole of society approach, which obviously you've outlined the reasons why the healthcare systems also need to be very sensitive to the needs of women and girls as well, and not just in terms of physical, but in terms of mental health as well. Time is of the essence, and because of that, I've seen that there are two more contributions from Ajane and Relissa. We will give you the floor, and then unfortunately we will have to wrap up. Ajane, Relissa,
I I guess I could start then.
yeah,
I wanted to mention was the fact that alongside with having period cramps is that a lot of females have to be heavily medicated. And that can pose as a problem because for me, when I was in school, I had to take a lot of medication to eliminate the pain, and it interrupted my learning. It interrupted a lot of the learning I had to do because I was focused on the fact that I was getting bad cramps and that I could not focus. I sometimes I couldn't even hear, speak, see. A lot of these things would affect you on a very high level that you could not compute. And being at school at the same time was just, it felt like a lot. It felt like you were about to just crash out. That is one thing I wanted to mention, the fact that we are so medicated and then we have to show up to school. I think there should be something implemented that, especially for the young girls who do have bad period cramps, that's something to eliminate the fact that we have to still be at school and still be heavily medicated, heavily under these drugs, and then still in a lot of pain and still having to learn a whole syllabus and stuff like that, because it's not like our period comes once a year, it comes every single month. So imagine every single month in a school term. That can stop a lot of learning curves, and I think that's something that needs to be addressed, the fact that we have to be on medication and on medication, not focusing, and still have to learn within that 3 to 5 days in a whole month continually. That is one thing I wanted to address.
thank you. And Ajane,
Okay, so I've been hearing a lot of talk, and I agree with all the girls. But a very common topic that I've heard is that I believe we need to advocate for is self-love. Girls are supposed to realize that periods are natural and they don't have to beat up themselves about it. Oftentimes, we have oftentimes your period last month won't be the same as this month. For me, particularly, when I am stressed or overwhelmed, I am gonna get hit with some awful nausea. I would have a beautiful period the first month, but the next month it would be awful nausea where I can't even eat. I'd be running from in the middle of my class, I'd be running out to go and vomit, and that's not so amazing. So if we can teach girls that periods do cause certain symptoms, maybe they can learn to open up and talk. Also, we have to teach empathy. Oftentimes, you may have a student laugh after, or as I've been hearing, you would hear the comment, "Oh, you're being overly dramatic." I mean, the last thing you want to hear during all these mood swings, this nausea, these cramps, this pain is that you're being over dramatic. No, we need to teach empathy. We need to teach our girls that it is perfectly normal, that you are normal for having your period and to love yourself and your period. Your period is an amazing thing. It's an amazing phenomena for the woman's body. And when we start to encourage our girls to appreciate this phenomena, we would really have them we would really have open conversations, and they would be more comfortable to talk with those around them. Yeah, thank you again.
Thank you as well, Ajane. And as you can see, the comment section is also quite lively with women like yourselves who identify with some of the issues that you have raised and some of the solutions that you have proposed as well. Um, as we wrap up tonight's discussion, I want to hear from each of you one last time. Um, and I'm thinking of just how to coach this because we spoke about government, but we know that government is not the only factor or the only player. We know that it starts in the home. We know that parents, men, boys need to be sensitized. We know that it's important that the facilities, the necessary facilities, are made available, and of course that there is reliable and sensitive healthcare systems in place to respond to the needs. So the question that I'll pose, if you could ask um, decision makers, so that could be government, that could be school administrators, that could be leaders of families, or even maybe church groups. If there was one change that you think needs urgent attention to improve menstrual health and hygiene, what would that be? Let's start with Adia.
All right, Kareem, can you repeat the question again?
Yeah, sorry. There's just one change for governments, policymakers, but leaders in general, whether those are the leaders of families, leaders of households, church leaders, school administrators. What's your one ask that something that needs urgent attention to improve menstrual health and hygiene for girls in the Eastern Caribbean?
Okay. So to start off, it may sound very cliche, but don't forget us. Don't forget us. Don't forget that it's not just the 5 to 7 days, the 3 to 5 days that we're bleeding is a period. We're going through our cycle every single day of our lives. And not forgetting that this is something that we have to continuously endure also just shifts the mindset of society a bit, that yes, we include women, we care about you, we're here for you, and this is something that you have to go through, and so we're going to cater to your need. Specifically though, I think I would definitely zero in on education and advocacy. It's something I hold very dear to my heart, as well as access to proper health care. Now, just very quickly, I don't know how many of you have actually gone to see a gynecologist, but because of my specific conditions, a gynecologist is somebody that I have to see regularly. And not everybody has the resources or the privilege, I should say, to be able to go to a gynecologist every month, every 2 months. And I think the cost implications of menstrual cycles, access to products, lack of education and advocacy around it are definitely three specific areas that I'd like you to remember. Don't forget us. Always include us. Know that this is a consistent struggle. And while we are managing it, don't forget that it's a struggle still. So empathy on a national policy, private sector, just the need for collective partnership. That's probably my overall comment. Collective partnership, collective responsibility. It's not us individually trying to tackle the situation, but rather how can we include everyone so that in every space and in every case, whether private sector, government, education, workplace, that we are included and we feel seen, we feel heard.
Solid. Mariah, your final comments.
Well, this for me is something I'm very interested about. So in Trinidad and Tobago, our government is heavily investing in our film industry and it's growing every day. I believe with I believe we can use product placement strategies to get our message across without the stigma. So to get it out to a wider audience, normalizing periods and menstruational cycles in our media and our films. This is through placing product making period products part of normal day films and media and on a whole. This is just one little affirmation that I want to leave with my girls today. You are not strange. You are not different. You are not weak. Your period is another part of who you are. And this is all from Mariah.
Thank you for that, Mariah. Relissa, your final words.
Hi. The last thing I would like to say is, to answer your question about what, but it was something about the government and what I would like them to change is the stigma around periods and the fact that some people may think that periods do not affect you on a daily basis, when in actuality it does. It does affect you on numerous occasions, whether it be how you go about your day, what you do in the day, what you can and cannot do in the day, where you go, who you meet, how you meet people, especially interacting with people, and the changes that your body's going through, and how you interact daily. Because how you interact when you're not on your period or on your menstrual cycle is definitely not the same way that you would interact when you're on it or when you're off it. So if the government could address that, or maybe what's the word? Not address, but address it, yes. But if the narrative that periods are not effective and then not putting anything into place to then counteract it, if that could be changed, I think a lot of the work inclusivity, especially with women and men, and putting it in a place that women and men can start to understand each other. Because yes, we do have periods as women, but I think there are some things that men probably do go through that may not be as heavy as periods, but can be somewhat similar to it in terms of, it could be, I don't know, stunt growth or something. But if we could address it so that there's more inclusivity, more, especially in workplaces, schools, conversations, so that people can feel a lot more inclusive and understand that my effects, my period, the effect I have when I come into the world, when I address you, when I talk to my friends, when I talk to my family, when I talk to anyone, that can be different depending on if I'm on my cycle, if I'm on my cycle, what phase of my cycle I'm on. All those things are effective based on where I'm at and what is going on. And it's not necessarily emotions. That's a thing that they like to throw around, that women are emotional. We are not emotional in that sense that we're overly emotional. It's just that we are always changing. Men typically stay the same, but we change in terms of our body and biologically and things like that. But that is something that I would like to address. That's one thing that's changed, the stigma around the effects of period is what I would like to address. That there.
Thank you. Uniqua, your last word from Anguilla.
Okay, I love the points that were given. And for me personally, I would ask leaders to help make healthcare cheaper, because in many Caribbean islands, having access to hospitals is very costly, and many people can't afford it. So, yeah, many young women or women will have to suffer or endure certain pain because they do not have the funds to get themselves checked out. So, if it was one thing, I would definitely recommend cheaper healthcare for women.
Thank you. And Ajane,
Okay. Thank you. Reinforce one major point. The bathroom, the bathroom, and very importantly, the bathroom. Our bathrooms need to be period friendly. We should be able to go into the bathroom, and just like how in most bathrooms we can grab a napkin or toilet paper, we should be able to go and grab a sanitary napkin or a tampon. Bathrooms should also be outfitted with shelves because not everyone wants to use the public things that were provided by public. So if we can have shelves to put our bags or our care kits to fix ourselves, change ourselves, and get going again, we should be afforded that space. And also reinforcing what one of my colleagues, Sumira, I believe, said. Yeah, Sumira said, is that we need to make it comfortable. The bathroom is where everyone goes, whether they're sad, happy, or angry, to just catch themselves. And if our bathrooms could be open and comfortable, I think people would be confident walking in knowing that there's a space there for them and that they are heard and their basic needs are trying to be met. So I urge the government and by extension the workforces or even the schools to just update our bathrooms. Thank you.
thank you. And of course, your messaging has been very consistent right through. Sumira, last but not least.
Hi again. So I definitely agree with Adia's point. I loved it actually. Is think about us. I know it's a simple statement, but literally think about us. Think about us women, not just women. Think about men. Think about everyone, and think about how you can include everyone in what's available, and that is our healthcare. So in St. Lucia, we have an issue where a lot of people are not able to afford healthcare. It's very expensive. Private doctors are very expensive as well. Going to health centers, even it may not be expensive. It may be a bit, better for your pockets, but it is also very hard to see a doctor when going to health centers, public health centers. So we definitely need to establish free healthcare. This is something that has been in the media. Several conversations have been held about having free healthcare, but it is very, very necessary. When it ties into menstrual health, girls need to be able to access free healthcare. We need to be able to go to our gynecologist regularly, not just when we have a problem. And I think that's also what all of us need to consider is that we do need to go to our doctors, not just when we have a problem, but also for consistent checkups when we can. So if we do have if we do have free healthcare, then something like that could be established where we are able to go to our doctors freely, our general practitioners, etc. Because health is wealth. I also think that right in school. Sorry, I took down little points, so I'm trying to make sure I state my points before I leave. But I really do think that mental health is, well, some ways to assist mental health or assist women in schools are implemented in some schools. However, we need it in all schools, right? We do have, well, at my alma mater, which is the South CC, South Arthur Lewis Community College, there are free period product dispensers. However, it's not something that's implemented in all schools. What about secondary schools, which have large populations? What about my past school as well, St. Joseph's Convent, which has a large population of girls? Why don't we have a free a period product dispenser there as well? I also think it's also very important to include menstrual health in the curriculum as well, because it's not just something that should be brought up during a health and family life and education class. It's something that can be brought up in biology. You can speak about it in social studies when it comes to menstrual equity, period poverty. You can speak about the sustainable development goals, how it ties into menstrual health. And then also the most important thing is that we train teachers and parents. We have to remember that, especially for parents, that family is somewhat of the most important social institution that exists, right? This is the first people we meet, but our parents. These are the first people we meet. These are the people that we learn things from. Culture is passed down that way. So we need to be able to teach our parents, especially, that this is not a taboo topic, and it's okay to inform your girls, boys, etc. about it. It's something that parents themselves should be comfortable to speak about, and empower their girls, so that in turn their boys and girls can empower others and support others. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. And on that note, we're going to bring this evening's discussion to a close. Um, Thank you, Adia. Thank you, Ajane. Thank you, Mariah. Thank you, Relissa. Thank you, Sumira. And thank you, Uniqua, for your honesty, your courage, and your leadership tonight. This has been a very inspiring conversation. It has certainly been a very eye opening conversation for me personally. And I think that at the end of it, we can all agree that menstruation, periods, discussions like these are very important, and that the particular issue and topic that we discuss of periods, it should never really be a barrier to girls' right to dignity, their right to education, and their overall right to opportunity. And I think for us at UNICEF, conversations like these are especially important because our work surrounds children, it surrounds the issues that children face. And I think that we are never in a position to advocate, to bring issues about the issues that affect children to governments, to partners, unless we hear from you first. And so many of the thoughts that have been shared, we will do some additional work as well in terms of hearing more views, but certainly the thoughts and the views and opinions that were shared tonight will shape the our work going forward and the advocacy that we take forward to governments. And that's part of the reason why I've been asking you about, especially what can be changed in terms of policy, what can be changed in our schools, because we don't want this just to be about talk, but also to be about the actions that we take forward. Before we go, I also want to extend a heartfelt thanks to two people behind the scenes who have been instrumental in making this conversation possible. First is Gabriel Aduwusu, who is our UNICEF water, sanitation, and hygiene specialist. He has been leading the charge in terms of putting menstrual hygiene on the agenda in the Eastern Caribbean, and he certainly was very proactive in coming forward and saying that this is a conversation that he thinks is very important and that we need to have. So thank you very much to Gabriel. And also for Hannah Mubulia, who is our youth engagement officer, who continues to do a very incredible job of ensuring that children and young people are included in these conversations, and who has also had a special hand in planning this evening's event. And she's actually here with me right now producing the event. So thank you very much for Hannah. Um, and with that, again, I am Kareem Smith. I want to thank you once again for joining the event, those who joined us on Instagram, on Facebook, and on YouTube. And I want to encourage you to keep the conversation going and to let's continue working together for a future where every girl can manage her period with pride, safety, and dignity. Thank you very much and good night.